So recently I've been thinking about a huge hurdle that people face when they are starting recovery or thinking about recovery from an eating disorder. That hurdle that is quite unique in eating disorder recovery, I think, and it's one of the major sticking points in recovery as well. That hurdle is, what if you don't want to recover? What if you're not motivated to recover, you're reluctant to recover? I think this is a really common thing that we experience in eating disorder recovery, and I haven't really addressed it on my channel, and so I wanted to talk about it a bit more. This reluctance to recover that I'm talking about is really frustrating for family members. I know that my parents, my sister, they couldn't understand why I wouldn't recover. Like, why didn't I just eat? Why wouldn't I just try harder to recover? It can be really frustrating for people to watch. Clinicians I know struggle with it as well, and it's, I think in treatment it's often called non-compliance, and is a reason why people are prematurely discharged from eating disorder treatment, because they have this lack of motivation or lack of desire to recover, which is really a part of the mental illness. And it's incredibly frustrating for people like us with the eating disorder as well, because even if there's a part of us that wants to recover, there's this huge other part that is hugely reluctant and overwhelmed at the prospect of recovery and all our fears that we have around that. And so I want to go through some of those fears or some of those reasons that people with an eating disorder might not want to recover. And I actually found quite an interesting research article on this that outlined 7 components or 7 reasons why people might not want to recover from anorexia, and so I'm going to reference that article below and the details, and so that you can read that article if you want to. So I'm going to talk about the factors that they mentioned and then also sort of combine that with my own experiences and my own thoughts. The first reason that they mentioned for why people might not want to recover from anorexia or an eating disorder is essentially a fear of judgment from others. It's easy to think that this fear of judgment maybe comes down to weight, size, shape only, but it doesn't. There definitely is a big part of it that is around fearing people's judgment of what we look like, but it is more than that, and I'm going to address the more than that part of it shortly. Unfortunately, people do make comments about what others look like. Feeling judged by others because of what our body looks like, whether that be something positive that someone says or something negative, makes recovery feel really terrifying, because for a lot of us going through recovery, our bodies are likely going to change, or they might not change, but we might have a fear that they will change, and therefore we also and so we're also worried about what people will think of us when our bodies change. So people really shouldn't comment on weight, but they do. Whoa, you look so healthy. Have you gained weight? They could be, for example, someone complimenting you on your figure, and then you worry that people will think negatively if you gain weight. It could even be someone not saying anything, and then you think because they didn't say anything you must be too big and therefore you still need to lose more weight. I want to highlight something here, which is that someone could say something or someone could say nothing, and still we perceive them to have a judgment that reinforces our eating disorder. So I really think this fear of judgment, this judgment that we think people hold, is a part of the mental illness. There are some phrases people are advised to avoid when a loved one is recovering. For example, you look so healthy, you look so well, blah blah blah, and I agree that people should avoid saying those things, but I also think that those phrases or comments from other people become much less triggering the further you move along recovery, because you gain more perspective when you recover, and so there's sort of less waiting on what people think of your body and how important that is to you. Sorry for the unintended pun on that one. When we have anorexia or an eating disorder, we spend a lot of time thinking about our bodies. We often spend a lot of time thinking about other people's bodies or looking at other people's bodies, and we become really obsessed with size and shape and what our bodies look like. And I think we start to assume, subconsciously perhaps, that others also care a lot about bodies and spend a lot of time thinking about bodies, but in actual fact they don't. As you recover from anorexia, you lose this obsession with your own body, with other people's bodies. You also lose that feeling that people are judging you on your body, because you're not thinking about bodies anymore, and you realize that other people don't really spend that much time thinking about it either. Through my recovery, people have made some comments on my body, so I'm not going to lie to you and say that that doesn't happen, because it does. I've definitely had people make comments through my recovery. Not as many as I expected, but a few times. These comments, I think, are much more a reflection on the people who said them rather than anything about you. It is something that those people have in common. Those people who commented on my body, they all have something in common, and that is that they have their own issues with food and weight that are unresolved. And so I really do think that if people make comments about your weight or your body, that's on them. It's not to do with you. But by and large, people who are comfortable in their bodies and authentic, and the people who matter, will not care if you gain weight or if your body changes, and probably won't really notice. Changes might be really obvious to you, but they aren't to others. So the other fear of judgment that we might have in recovery is to do with fear of how others might judge our success. So oftentimes when we have an eating disorder, people might say something to try and encourage us to recover. You have so much potential, yet you're wasting your life on an eating disorder. Imagine all that you could achieve if you actually recovered. These expectations about the future can really ignite fear, and I know that they did for me in particular. I had no idea. I think when you have an eating disorder, it's completely normal to have no idea what you want to do down the line in the future, because your mind is completely occupied by food and weight and your eating disorder, and you have no room to think about the future. And the other thing is that eating disorders are really, really mean, and they will make you think that you cannot achieve anything in the future, that the only thing that you're good at is losing weight, or the only thing that you're good at is purging or something like that. And it begins to feel really overwhelming. How can I possibly recover if I'm expected to achieve so much in the future? I can't possibly achieve all that. I would rather stay safe in my eating disorder so that people don't judge me for being a failure in the future. In the midst of my eating disorder, whenever I lost some marks on a test or did poorly at something, I could blame that on my eating disorder. I could say, well, I lost a few marks there, but I probably would have done better if I wasn't struggling with anorexia. But when you recover from anorexia, there's nothing to fall back on anymore. It's like if you don't achieve as well as you wanted to, that really does come down to you. You don't have a mental illness to blame for that anymore. So when you do poorly, there's no more, oh, it's because of anorexia. But I so want to emphasize that anorexia is really mean, and like the eating disorder most specifically will manifest around food, but it comes out in other areas of life as well, I think. When I had my eating disorder, I could never achieve highly enough. I could never exercise enough. I could never lose enough weight. I could never do anything well enough with my eating disorder. Eating disorders are not at all compassionate. They are not looking after our best interests. They do not offer a balanced perspective on life. This kind of perfectionism and obsessiveness diminishes with recovery as well. Part of recovery is developing self-compassion. So when you recover, you don't have this nasty voice in your head as much. You might not achieve 100% on everything. You might not achieve the level of success that you wanted to initially, but you also don't beat yourself up like you used to. I can't say enough times that recovery really does give you a more balanced perspective to see what is truly important in life, and it is not food. It is not getting A+++. Recovery really does give you a more self-compassionate view and resilience to cope with losses or failure. So I'm going to address the other reasons that you might not want to recover in future videos, because this one is already long. Also important before I finish this video that I note that I do live within privilege. I have the privilege of avoiding the judgment of a majorly fat-phobic society. Even so, from what I've seen and heard from fat activists, and I encourage you to follow some, is that authentically in your own body provides a kind of self-confidence that outweighs the fear of judgment that you might have initially. Again, sorry for the pun. So ultimately, when you start recovery, yes, you'll probably have a big fear of judgment. That's normal, that's part of having anorexia or an eating disorder as a mental illness, really, I think. Recover, you will start to feel much less anxious about what others think of you and what they think of your body. It's really just to start recovery anyway, even though that fear probably is still with you, but then as you continue along the journey, that fear will dissipate. Okay, I'm gonna finish this video here. Thank you for watching. I hope you're keeping safe and well, and I'll record again soon. Bye!